If you've ever felt detached, spaced out, or like you're watching your life from the outside, you're not alone. This might be dissociation. It's an experience that's far more common than you realize. It's particularly common for people living with depression or with unresolved traumatic experiences. Dissociation also often happens during a Spravato session, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, as we'll find out. So, if you are thinking about Spravato, stay tuned as I'm going to break down exactly what dissociation is, why the brain uses it, why Spravato can bring it to the surface, and then how to work with it instead of fearing it. Let's jump in. First, a quick heads up. This is Marpa Minds, and I am your host, David Drapkin. I'm a social worker, a psychotherapist, and an advocate for mental health normalization and innovation. Dissociation is not random. It's not dangerous. It is a deeply human protective response. And during Spravato, it can actually become an opportunity for meaningful healing to happen. At its core, dissociation is a disruption in the normal integration of thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and your sense of self. In simple terms, you're present, but you're not fully here. You're functioning, but not in the fully normal way you would. Dissociation exists on a spectrum, from mild daydreaming all the way to profound tuning out because of overwhelming stress. It happens because the brain is trying to reduce emotional overload by dialing down your awareness. It's protective, adaptive, efficient. Your mind is saying, this is too much, I need to create some distance. So it does. Dissociation is most likely to show up during chronic stress, during conflict, during trauma, or during depressive shutdown states where motivation, emotions, and drive have collapsed. Statistics show that dissociation is observed in approximately 20 to 30% of patients diagnosed with major depressive disorder and around 40 to 50% of patients with treatment-resistant depression, far above the average person. Research shows that someone is more likely to experience dissociation when they have a significant history of childhood trauma or early life adversity. For many people, dissociation becomes a habitual mental reflex, and they may not even know it's happening. You might have heard of the psychological concept of a defense mechanism, yeah? A defense mechanism is simply a strategy that the mind uses to reduce emotional pain, uncertainty, and to protect the vulnerable parts within our self. The dissociative freeze response is, therefore, a basic survival strategy used by other mammals, not just humans. Think of a deer playing dead when facing a lion predator. Similarly, for us, when humans feel trapped and unable to fight or flight, we often freeze to minimize injury or block out the pain of what might happen to us next. This protective defense mechanism often begins in early life, especially when we repeatedly encounter stressors that we can't escape or solve. And then over time, this defense becomes automatic. And the problem is that defense mechanisms, while they're helpful at first, yes, they can become very rigid and limiting. The dissociation that once protected us ends up holding us back from emotional connection, from authentic self-awareness, and from full engagement with the potential of life. Because we're overly cautious, and these defense mechanisms are limiting our ability to handle stress and grow through it. There's good news. Defense mechanisms can change, and that's one of the ways that Spravato helps people with depression. How? Well, neurologically, Spravato resolves depression by activating the glutamate system, by stimulating AMPA receptors, and increasing brain-derived neurotrophic factors, BDNF. It temporarily disrupts your usual patterns of negative thinking, and because Spravato's got that well-known neuroplasticity, It speeds up neuron growth and the formation of new synaptic connections. These rapid antidepressant effects on the brain can make people dissociate during a Spravato session, often feeling like they're floating in space or they're detached from their body or sense of normal reality. Dissociation under Spravato is clinically safe and is really different to the dissociation caused by depression or trauma. Spravato-induced dissociation is expected, it's not a surprise. It also happens under medical supervision, plus tends to be really brief. So it's not a sign of trauma being reactivated. It's not a sign of instability or of being threatened like normal dissociation. When you're taking Spravato, dissociation is a direct reflection of the medication's mechanism of action in the brain. It's working. Whereas everyday dissociation, the kind that emerges from emotional overload, that's triggered by avoidance and protective defensive mechanisms. With Spravato, the feeling of being disconnected that people experience happens because the drug temporarily changes the brain's chemical signals and it resets how different parts of the brain talk to each other. So a key difference here is that regular dissociation pulls you away from emotions, whereas Spravato dissociation creates space for emotions to be felt more deeply and then processed more safely. Regular dissociation narrows awareness, whereas Spravato dissociation temporarily loosens the rigid thinking patterns that keep people stuck. For many patients, the Spravato dissociative state can feel unusual, yet maybe even uncomfortable, but not dangerous. And many people describe the dissociation as calming, peaceful, being pleasantly detached without all the usual mental chatter in their head. One other important thing I want to say is that Spravato's antidepressant effect comes from the biological changes happening in the brain, not from the dissociation itself. It's kind of a side effect, but it's also a sign of everything working as it should. When you are experiencing dissociation using Spravato, you're also getting excellent clinical support and hopefully combining that with things like psychotherapy, journaling, meditation. And that means that the Spravato-related dissociation combines with the neuroplasticity effects to create a powerful window for new insights. It's a chance to see long-standing patterns with a little more perspective. And then these small shifts that get repeated over multiple Spravato sessions, they create really meaningful, powerful psychological breakthroughs eventually. So, dissociation isn't a flaw. It's not inherently bad. It's actually a protective mechanism your brain developed for a reason. And during Spravato treatment, that kind of dissociation can become a doorway rather than a barrier to transformation. A doorway into curiosity, emotional clarity, and long-term healing. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Marpa Minds. We are a next-generation network of Spravato and ketamine clinics helping people with depression reclaim their mental health. To learn more, go to marpaminds.com. I'm David Drapkin. I'd love you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment below. See you next time. God bless.